I still remember the day everything changed. Not because there was anything particularly dramatic about it at first, but because of how ordinary it looked from the outside. The sky was a dull kind of blue, the kind that promises rain but never quite follows through. I was 7 months pregnant, sitting on the edge of our bed with my hands resting on the swell of my belly, talking to my unborn baby like I always did. I told them how much I loved them already, how I couldn't wait to meet them, how they were going to grow up in a home filled with laughter and warmth. I believed every word I said. At that moment, I truly thought life was unfolding exactly as it was supposed to. And then he walked in. The man I had once believed was the love of my life. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He didn't hold my hand or sit beside me or ask how I was feeling. He just stood there, by the doorway, like a stranger who had wandered into the wrong house. "I'm leaving," he said, just like that. No build-up, no explanation, no apology. And then, just as simply, he was gone. I don't even remember if I said anything back. I think I was too stunned to form words. The hours after that moment are a blur. Tears, confusion, denial. I called his phone a dozen times. I left voicemails that swung wildly between anger and heartbreak. But nothing. He didn't come back. He didn't check to see if I was okay. He didn't care that the woman he had promised to love, for better or worse, was now sitting alone on a bedroom floor, 7 months pregnant and completely shattered. People like to talk about heartbreak as if it's poetic, as if it's some kind of beautiful pain that makes you stronger. But real heartbreak, the kind that cracks you open from the inside out, it isn't poetic. It's messy. It's ugly. It's sobbing until you can't breathe. It's waking up in the middle of the night reaching for someone who isn't there. It's holding your belly and whispering to your unborn child, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know we'd have to do this alone." The first few months after my baby was born were the hardest of my life. I was exhausted, terrified, and angry all at once. I'd look at my child's tiny face and feel overwhelming love. And then guilt would creep in, because that love was tangled up with resentment. I hated that he had left me. I hated that he got to walk away from the responsibility while I was up at 3 a.m. with a screaming baby and cracked hands from washing bottles. I hated that he got to start over while I was trying to figure out how to rebuild from ashes. But beneath all that anger, there was another voice, a quieter one, but far more dangerous. It whispered things like, "No one will ever love you now. Who would want a single mom with trust issues and baggage? You're damaged." And I believed it. I believed every cruel word my mind threw at me. I convinced myself that my story was over before it even began, that I would spend the rest of my life alone, raising my child, watching everyone else move on without me. Then one night, I don't even remember what I was scrolling through, I came across a quote online. It said, "Be the person your child deserves." I must have read it 50 times. Something about those 6 words hit me harder than anything else had. My child didn't just deserve a mom who could provide diapers and formula. They deserved a mom who was alive, a mom who smiled, a mom who had dreams and passions and joy. And if I couldn't do it for myself yet, then I would do it for them. So I started small. Tiny steps, really. At first, it was just brushing my hair and putting on a clean shirt, even if I wasn't going anywhere. Then I started taking care of my skin, painting my nails after my baby fell asleep. It felt silly at first, like dressing up a broken doll. But over time, those small acts became something bigger. They were little promises I made to myself. I'm still here. I still matter. Months turned into a year, and little by little, I started to feel like a person again. I even bought a new dress. Nothing fancy, just something that made me feel pretty when I looked in the mirror. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't see a broken woman staring back at me. I saw someone strong, someone resilient, someone who had survived. Then another post crossed my path. This one said, "I am lovable. I am careable. I am worthy of all good things." It wasn't just the words themselves. It was how fiercely they were written. Like the person who typed them wasn't just saying them. They were claiming them, and something inside me snapped. I stood in front of the mirror, looked myself dead in the eye, and repeated those words until they stopped feeling like a lie, until they started to sound like the truth. And then I saw her, the woman I had spent years hiding from. Not the teenage-looking girl I used to think I was. Not the scared single mom who believed she was unlovable. But a woman who had sacrificed everything for love, only to be betrayed. And who still kept going. A woman who had carried a child into the world and built a life from the rubble. A woman who was still standing. It took me a long time to stop blaming myself for his choices. I had to unlearn so many lies. That I was too much, or not enough. Or that love failing meant I had failed. The truth is, he didn't leave because I wasn't worthy. He left because he wasn't capable of the love I deserved. It wasn't my fault that he led a double life. It wasn't my fault that he cheated. It wasn't my fault that he couldn't be the man I believed he was. And once I truly accepted that, I stopped carrying the weight of his mistakes on my shoulders. Something shifted in me around 2024. It wasn't a sudden burst of confidence. More like a quiet, steady flame that refused to go out. I started to feel like the main character of my own story again. Life wasn't just happening to me anymore. I was happening to it. I'd catch myself narrating my own life in my head. I'd take long showers, the kind where you exfoliate, deep condition, shave and moisturize every inch of your body, and come out feeling like I could conquer the world. I'd pass a mirror and think, damn, I'm actually beautiful. I'd make myself a cup of coffee and say out loud, any good man would be lucky to have me, even on my worst days. And maybe that sounds small, maybe it sounds silly, but after years of feeling invisible and unwanted, believing that I was worthy, truly worthy, was nothing short of revolutionary. Now, as I sit here 3 weeks into recovery from throat surgery, I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something big. I don't know what it is yet. Maybe it's love, maybe it's a new chapter, maybe it's both. But I can feel it coming. This isn't the end of my story. It's just the climax before the plot twist. I imagine my future husband sometimes, not in a desperate way, but in a hopeful one. I think about how he'll meet my sass and sarcasm with a smile. How he'll laugh at the way I talk to pots and pans when they don't cooperate in the kitchen. I think about how he'll see my scars and love me because of them, not despite them. And I hope that when he walks into my life, he'll understand that he's not saving me, because I've already saved myself. He's just adding to a story that was already worth telling. But even if he doesn't come tomorrow, or next month, or even next year, that's okay. Because I'm no longer waiting for someone to complete me. I'm already whole. I'm already enough. And that, more than anything, is what I want my child to see. I want them to know that their mom isn't just a survivor. She's a force. She's a woman who refused to let heartbreak define her. She's a woman who built a life worth living, for both of us. The first morning after my throat finally stopped aching, I did something I hadn't done in years. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, looked at my reflection, and smiled. It wasn't a perfect smile. I was still a little pale, still tired, still healing. But it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was looking at me again. Not the abandoned wife, not the exhausted single mom, not the woman who once thought she was unworthy of love. Just me. Recovery is a strange thing. It's not a straight line. It's a slow climb, full of tiny victories you barely notice and setbacks that feel bigger than they are. But every small step counts. I started walking every morning, even if it was just around the block with my daughter. I cooked healthier meals, not because I was trying to change myself, but because I finally believed I was worth nourishing. I started reading again. Romance novels, memoirs, self-help books. And each page reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That my story was still being written, and I was the one holding the pen. With time, my confidence stopped feeling like a performance and started feeling like the truth. I no longer needed to hype myself up in the mirror every morning. I simply knew I was enough. I stopped apologizing for my past and started owning it. Yes, I had been abandoned. Yes, I had been betrayed. Yes, I had doubted my worth. But I had also rebuilt myself from the ground up. I had raised a child on my own. I had created a home filled with laughter and love, even when my heart was breaking. I had survived. And not just survived, but thrived. Something else changed, too. People noticed. It wasn't anything dramatic. No grand makeover montage or sudden flood of attention. It was subtler than that. Strangers started smiling at me in the grocery store. Friends commented on how different I seemed. Even my daughter, wise beyond her years, told me one night, "Mom, you look happy now." And she was right. I was happy. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was finally proud of the woman staring back at me in the mirror. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. I was at a local bookstore with my daughter, browsing the self-help section, ironically looking for a book about parenting teenagers long before I'd need it, when a man struck up a conversation. He looked to be in his early 40s. Kind eyes, warm smile, the sort of energy that feels safe. We talked about books, about our kids, about how both of us had a tendency to read the last page before starting a novel. It was simple, ordinary, nothing earth-shattering. But it felt nice, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel curious about someone again. We exchanged numbers, and over the next few weeks we texted here and there about movies, recipes, parenting fails. Nothing serious, nothing heavy. Just two people getting to know each other. And here's the thing. It wasn't about falling in love. It wasn't even about dating, not really. It was about proving to myself that I was still capable of connection, that I could still open my heart, even just a little. But more importantly, I realized something. I didn't need a man to validate my worth. His attention was nice, sure, but it didn't define me. If things fizzled out, I'd still be me. Strong, whole, and worthy. And if something more grew from it, then it would be a beautiful bonus, not a missing piece. Around this time, I started investing in myself in bigger ways. I enrolled in a night class, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the courage for. I learned how to budget better, started saving for a dream vacation for me and my daughter, and even launched a small online business selling handmade candles. It was scary, stepping into new territory, but it also felt exhilarating. Every decision I made was a quiet declaration. I am building a life for us, a good life, a full life. And then, one night, as I was tucking my daughter into bed, she asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. "Mom," she said, her little face serious, "do you think Dad regrets leaving us?" I sat down beside her and took a deep breath. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to plant seeds of bitterness in her heart. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "I don't know what he feels, but I do know this. People who walk away often carry regrets, and people who stay and love and grow, they carry peace." She nodded slowly, then smiled. "Then I'm glad we have peace." That night, after she fell asleep, I cried. Not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. Because despite everything, we had built a life full of peace. A few months later, I ran into my ex for the first time in years. It happened at a coffee shop, completely by accident. He looked older, more tired, like the weight of his choices had finally caught up to him. We exchanged polite small talk about our child, about work, about nothing and everything. And then he said something that, once upon a time, would have shattered me. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "I should never have left." And instead of feeling angry or vindicated or desperate for closure, I just felt free. Because I finally understood that his mistake was never my responsibility to fix. I smiled and replied, "I hope you find peace too." And then I walked away. Not out of bitterness, but out of strength. By the time 2025 rolled around, my life looked nothing like it had 5 years earlier. My home was full of warmth and laughter. My daughter was thriving, bold, curious, full of that sarcastic wit she definitely inherited from me. My business was growing. My nights were filled with book club meetings, late-night baking experiments, and impromptu dance parties in the kitchen. And my heart? It was open, not desperate, not waiting, but open. The man from the bookstore, his name was Adam. And I kept talking. We went on a few dates, slow and steady. We shared stories about our pasts, our kids, our dreams. He knew my scars and didn't flinch. He saw my strength and admired it. And whether or not he becomes my future, I know now that love is possible. Not the desperate, clinging kind I once chased, but the gentle, steady kind that meets you where you are. Most importantly, I've learned that my story isn't about who left. It's about who stayed. I stayed. Through the heartbreak, through the loneliness, through the rebuilding. I stayed. And because I stayed, I get to write the rest of this story on my own terms. If you had told me 5 years ago that I would one day wake up happy, truly happy, I wouldn't have believed you. Back then, happiness felt impossible. But here's what I've learned. Happiness isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build, brick by brick, choice by choice. And every day that I choose myself, every day that I choose to love and to hope and to grow, I am building a life far more beautiful than the one I lost. Life after heartbreak is strange. People talk about moving on, as if it's a finish line you cross one day and never look back. But that's not how it works. Healing is not a straight path. It's a circle. You revisit old wounds, old memories, old versions of yourself. And every time you circle back, you see them with a little more clarity. A little more compassion. That's how it's been for me these last few months. Learning how to live as both who I was and who I'm becoming. Motherhood still anchors me, of course. It always will. My daughter is my reason for every sunrise, the heartbeat behind every choice I make. But I've started to notice something new in our life. Space. Space for me. Space for dreams that aren't just about survival. Space for a future that isn't built entirely around someone else's needs. I'm still a mom, but I'm also a woman with ambitions, desires, flaws, and an identity beyond mom. And that realization has been liberating. But with growth comes guilt. At least, it did for me. I remember one night after my daughter was asleep, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine and a stack of notebooks. I had been outlining ideas for expanding my candle business, dreaming of turning it into a full-time career. But instead of excitement, a wave of shame washed over me. Shouldn't I be focusing all my energy on her? What if chasing my dreams means I'm not present enough? What if she thinks I'm choosing myself over her? It's the kind of guilt single moms know too well. The guilt of wanting more than just survival. But here's what I realized. My daughter doesn't need a mother who sacrifices herself completely. She needs a mother who shows her what's possible. She needs to see that you can be both. Nurturing and ambitious, selfless, and self-fulfilled. So I kept writing. I kept planning. I kept building. Business grew slowly but steadily. Orders trickled in, and soon I was mailing packages not just across town but across the country. I even started attending weekend markets, setting up a small booth with handmade labels and handwritten thank you notes. It wasn't just about selling candles. It was about reclaiming my confidence, proving to myself that I could create something meaningful with my own 2 hands. Meanwhile, Adam, the man from the bookstore, and I were still in each other's lives, though neither of us was rushing things. He'd stop by sometimes with coffee and muffins on Saturday mornings. We'd take our kids to the park together, or sit on the porch talking about books and music long after the sun went down. I liked how easy it felt. There were no games, no pressure, no need to prove anything. He didn't try to fix me, and I didn't try to be anyone other than who I was. But even in the ease, fear lingered. Some nights, lying awake, I'd find myself rehearsing conversations in my head. What if he leaves too? What if I'm not enough? What if history repeats itself? Trauma is funny like that. It doesn't care how much healing you've done. It sneaks back in, whispering lies when you least expect it. But every time the fear crept in, I reminded myself, I'm not that same woman anymore. And even if it did happen again, I now know I'd survive it. One evening, Adam and I went out to dinner. Just the two of us. It was nothing fancy, just a cozy Italian place tucked away on a quiet street. But for me it was monumental. It was the first real date I'd been on since my marriage ended. I remember sitting across from him, laughing over a shared bowl of pasta, and suddenly realizing how far I'd come. I wasn't thinking about the man who left. I wasn't comparing Adam to anyone. I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was simply present, enjoying a moment I once believed I'd never have again. After dinner, as we walked to our cars, Adam stopped and turned to me. "You know," he said softly, "you talk about your past a lot, but always like it's something that happened to you. Do you ever talk about the woman who walked through it?" His words stuck with me. For so long, I had framed my story around what was done to me. Abandonment, betrayal, heartbreak. But my story wasn't just about being left. It was about who I became afterward. It was about resilience. It was about survival. And maybe, just maybe, it was about love too. Love for myself, and maybe even for someone new. The next few months were full of small, beautiful moments. Weekend road trips with my daughter, late-night talks with Adam, mornings spent experimenting with new candle scents in my kitchen. Life wasn't perfect. It never is. But it was full. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Then came an unexpected twist. My ex, the man who had vanished without a trace 5 years earlier, reached out. It started with an email, then a message, then a request to meet. At first, I ignored him. What could he possibly have to say after all this time? But eventually, curiosity and closure got the better of me. We met at a coffee shop. Neutral ground, public, safe. He looked nervous, older, regretful. "I'm sorry," he said over and over. "I was young, stupid, afraid." He talked about how he had been living with guilt for years, how leaving was the biggest mistake of his life, how he thought about our child every single day. And maybe once, a long time ago, those words would have been all I needed, but now they felt small, late, hollow. I listened, I nodded, and then I told him the truth, that his leaving had broken me. Yes, but it had also built me. That I was no longer the woman he abandoned. That I had forgiven him, not for his sake, but for mine. And when he asked, because of course he did, if there was any chance we could try again, I smiled gently and shook my head. "I don't need you to come back," I said, because I never left myself again. Walking out of that coffee shop was one of the most liberating moments of my life. It felt like closing a chapter that had been left unfinished for far too long. And as I stepped into the cool evening air, I realized something important. I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward something. Something better, stronger, fuller. Back home, I curled up on the couch with my daughter and watched a silly movie. She fell asleep with her head on my lap, and I thought about how far we'd come. From tears on a bedroom floor to laughter in a living room filled with warmth. I thought about how much love had grown in the spaces where heartbreak once lived, and I smiled, knowing the story wasn't over. Not even close, because this wasn't a story about abandonment anymore. It wasn't even a story about survival. It was a story about transformation, about taking the pain meant to destroy you and turning it into the foundation for something extraordinary. And as the credits rolled on the screen in front of us, I whispered to myself, "This is just the middle. The best chapters are still ahead." I always thought that falling in love again would feel like lightning, sudden, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. But it didn't. It felt like sunlight peeking through the clouds after a long storm. It felt gentle, slow, almost hesitant, and maybe that's exactly what I needed. Not a whirlwind, but a steady breeze. Something safe. Something real. Adam and I had been seeing each other for nearly a year now, though neither of us had put labels on anything. At first, I told myself I was keeping my distance, protecting my heart, but deep down I knew the truth. I was scared. Scared to trust again. Scared to build something new only to watch it crumble. Scared that maybe I didn't know how to love anymore. But every time those fears crept in, Adam would do something small. A text just to say, "Good morning." A surprise visit with my favorite coffee. A patient silence when I wasn't ready to talk. And each small thing chipped away at the walls I had built. One night, after I tucked my daughter into bed, he and I sat on the porch watching the stars. It was one of those quiet evenings where the world feels soft and everything slows down. He reached for my hand, not grabbing it, not demanding anything, just offering. And I let him hold it. We sat like that for a long time, saying nothing. And then he asked gently, "Do you trust me?" The question caught me off guard. My instinct was to answer quickly, to say, "Of course," even if I wasn't sure. But I didn't want to lie, so I took a deep breath and told him the truth. "I'm learning to," I said, "and every day I trust you a little more." He smiled, squeezed my hand, and said, "That's all I need." It wasn't a movie moment. There were no fireworks or dramatic music, but it was real, deeply, quietly real. And that night, something shifted. I realized that trust doesn't happen in an instant. It's built piece by piece, through consistency, patience, and kindness. And Adam was willing to build it with me. As our relationship deepened, so did the challenges. Blending our lives wasn't as simple as fairy tales make it seem. My daughter, though polite and kind, was cautious around him. She had only ever known life with me. The idea of someone new in that space felt unfamiliar. I didn't want to rush her. She deserved to set the pace. So Adam and I kept things gentle. He'd join us for Sunday brunch or family movie night. But he never pushed for more. And slowly she began to warm up to him. She'd ask about his day, show him her drawings, even laugh at his corny dad jokes. And one evening, when she casually referred to him as our friend Adam, my heart swelled. Still, there were moments of doubt. Quiet nights when I'd stare at the ceiling wondering if I was doing the right thing. Was I confusing my daughter by letting someone new in? Was I setting myself up for heartbreak again? But every time those questions surfaced, I'd think about how much I had grown. I wasn't that broken woman anymore. And this wasn't about replacing the past. This was about writing a new chapter. One that honored where we'd been while embracing where we were going. Then, life threw me a curveball. Not a bad one, but a challenging one. My business, which had started as a small side project, exploded. A viral social media post brought in more orders than I could handle. And suddenly I was juggling motherhood, a growing company, and a relationship all at once. I was overwhelmed, stretched thin, and terrified I was going to drop one of the balls I was juggling. Adam noticed before I even said a word. "You don't have to do this alone," he told me. And he meant it. He helped me package orders late into the night. He designed a simple website to make sales easier. He even offered to watch my daughter on weekends so I could focus. And each gesture reminded me that love isn't just about romance. It's about partnership. It's about showing up. Not with grand gestures, but with steady, quiet support. One evening after a particularly long day, I broke down. Not because anything had gone wrong, but because everything felt too heavy. I sat on the kitchen floor, tears streaming down my face, whispering, "I can't do this." Adam knelt beside me, wiped my tears, and said, "You already are." Then he took my face in his hands and looked me straight in the eyes. "You've done harder things than this. You've survived heartbreak. You've raised an incredible kid. You've built a life from nothing, And you're still here, still fighting, still thriving. Don't you dare underestimate yourself. Those words stayed with me. They weren't empty reassurance. They were a mirror, reflecting back the strength I sometimes forgot I had. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Love isn't supposed to save you. It's supposed to remind you that you were strong all along. As the months passed, the three of us, me, my daughter, and Adam, started to feel like a family. Not the picture-perfect kind from movies, but the messy, beautiful kind built on patience, laughter, and shared effort. We took road trips. We had game nights. We even argued about parenting styles, about schedules, about silly things like whose turn it was to wash the dishes. But through it all, we kept choosing each other. One night, as I tucked my daughter into bed, she looked up at me with sleepy eyes and said, "Mom, you're happy now." I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Yeah," I whispered. "I think I am." And I was. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because my happiness no longer depended on perfection. It came from knowing that I was building a life I was proud of, a life where I was loved, not for who someone wanted me to be, but for exactly who I was. And as I lay in bed that night, listening to the soft hum of the world outside, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one sobbing on the floor, convinced her story was over. I wish I could go back and tell her that her story was just beginning, that the pain would forge her strength, that the loneliness would teach her independence, that the betrayal would lead her to a love deeper than anything she'd known, and that one day she would wake up in a home filled with laughter, peace, and possibility, not because someone saved her, but because she saved herself. If someone had told me 5 years ago that my life would look like this, the warmth, the laughter, the quiet stability, I would have laughed in disbelief. Back then, I couldn't see beyond the rubble of what had been broken. But now, standing in the middle of everything I've built, I realize that even the messiest beginnings can lead to the most beautiful stories. Still, even when things are good, life has a funny way of throwing you back into the deep end. Not to drown you, but to see how well you've learned to swim. It started with a phone call, one that I almost didn't answer. It was from a well-known lifestyle brand, one that had stumbled upon my candle business online. They loved my products, they said. They loved my story even more. And they wanted me to collaborate with them on a nationwide collection. My first instinct was to say no. Me? A single mom who started pouring candles at her kitchen table after her kid went to sleep? Surely they had the wrong person. But they didn't. They saw something in me that I was only just beginning to see in myself. Accepting the offer meant stepping way out of my comfort zone. It meant interviews, travel, meetings with people whose vocabulary included words like distribution strategy and brand positioning. It meant risking failure on a scale I'd never faced before. But deep down, I knew I had to do it. Not just for me, but for the little girl watching everything I did. I wanted her to grow up knowing that fear isn't a reason to back down. It's a reason to rise. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Product development, photo shoots, press events. Suddenly, my little side hustle was a full-fledged business, and I was being interviewed on podcasts and featured in magazines. People wanted to know my story. They wanted to know how I had gone from rock bottom to building something that mattered. And every time I told it, I felt the shame and pain of my past shrinking a little more, replaced by pride. But success, as wonderful as it is, comes with its own challenges. My schedule became chaotic. My daughter started missing me when I was away. And Adam, patient, steady Adam, sometimes felt like he was competing with a dream he couldn't quite understand. We never stopped loving each other. But we started missing each other in the noise of everything else. Late-night conversations turned into quick check-ins. Date nights became maybe next weekends, and I could feel the distance creeping in. One night, after a particularly long day, Adam came over. I expected the usual. A quiet dinner, a movie, maybe some laughter. But instead he sat me down and said, "I feel like I'm losing you." The words landed heavier than I expected. "Not because you're doing anything wrong," he added quickly, "but because you're chasing something so big, and I don't know if there's still space for me in it." I didn't have an answer. The truth was, I'd been asking myself the same question. Could I have it all? Could I be a mom, a business owner, a partner, and still take care of myself? Or was I destined to always sacrifice one part of my life for another? That night I didn't sleep much. I lay awake thinking about everything. About the girl who once believed she was unworthy of love. About the woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. About the mother who wanted to show her daughter that dreams are worth chasing. And I realized something important. I didn't come this far just to choose between happiness and success. I came this far to prove that I could build a life big enough to hold both. The next morning I asked Adam to meet me for coffee. "You're right," I told him. "I have been distant. I've been scared. Scared that if I slow down, everything I've built will fall apart. Scared that I'll disappoint everyone, including myself. But the truth is, none of it means anything without the people I love. None of it means anything without you." He listened quietly like he always does, and then he said something I'll never forget. "I don't need to be the center of your world. I just want to be a part of it." And just like that, the tension that had been building between us melted away, because love doesn't always demand center stage. Sometimes it just wants a seat in the audience, to cheer you on, to celebrate your wins, to pick you up when you fall. From that day forward, I made changes. Small ones, but meaningful ones. I blocked out family time in my schedule like it was the most important meeting of my week. Because it was. I learned to say no to opportunities that didn't align with my priorities. I let myself rest without feeling guilty. And slowly balance returned. My business continued to grow. But so did my relationships. My daughter thrived. Adam and I rediscovered our rhythm. And I felt more grounded than I ever had before. One evening, as the sun set behind our backyard, Adam and I sat on the porch while my daughter chased fireflies across the lawn. "Do you ever think about the life you almost didn't have?" he asked. I nodded. "All the time. If my ex hadn't left, if I hadn't broken down, if I hadn't rebuilt myself piece by piece, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be this woman." And as strange as it sounds, I was grateful for every heartbreak, every lonely night, every tear, because they had shaped me into someone I was proud to be. And maybe that's the greatest gift of all, realizing that the life you once thought was over was only just beginning, that the pain that once felt unbearable was actually paving the way for something extraordinary, that the woman who once doubted her worth was now teaching her daughter and herself what it truly means to be enough. The following week, the nationwide candle launch sold out in 3 days. My inbox was full of congratulations, partnership offers, and new opportunities. But none of it compared to the joy I felt when my daughter ran into my arms after school and whispered, "Mom, I told everyone you're a boss lady." That was the moment I knew I had done it. Not just built a business, but built a legacy. And as I stood there in our backyard, watching the fireflies glow against the fading light, I thought about how far I had come, from a scared, broken girl on a bedroom floor to a woman standing tall in a life she built with her own 2 hands. And the best part? I knew the story wasn't over yet. The best chapters were still waiting to be written. The thing about healing is that it doesn't prepare you for joy. It prepares you for survival, for heartbreak, for disappointment, for standing back up when life knocks you down. But joy, real bone-deep joy, the kind that creeps up quietly and makes a home in your chest, that always arrives as a surprise. That's what the next chapter of my life felt like. One long, beautiful surprise. It started with little things, Adam leaving handwritten notes in my purse before I left for work. My daughter insisting that we all wear matching pajamas on Saturday mornings. The three of us dancing in the kitchen while spaghetti boiled on the stove. I used to think love had to be loud. Grand gestures, dramatic declarations, sweeping movie moments. But I was learning that the real kind of love, the kind that lasts, is quiet. It's found in consistency, in small choices made every day, in showing up even when it's hard. My business was thriving in ways I'd never imagined. I'd hired a small team to help with production and logistics, and I finally had enough breathing room to enjoy what I was creating. I started hosting workshops for other women who wanted to start businesses. Most of them were moms. Women who, like me, had once believed their dreams ended when motherhood began. I watched their faces light up as they poured their first candle, wrote their first product description, made their first sale, and every time one of them thanked me for showing them it's possible, I felt a deep sense of purpose. My success wasn't just about me anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect. But even with all the good, there were moments that tested me. My ex tried reaching out again, this time asking to be more involved in our daughter's life. It stirred up complicated feelings. Part of me wanted to protect her from potential disappointment. Another part of me knew that she deserved the chance to form her own relationship with her father, no matter how flawed he was. After long conversations and therapy sessions, I agreed to let him be a part of her life, with boundaries. It wasn't easy watching him re-enter a space he'd once abandoned. But it wasn't about me anymore. It was about her, and to my surprise, she handled it with grace beyond her years. She asked questions, set her own expectations, and decided on her own terms how much space to give him. Watching her navigate that reminded me of something powerful. Children don't just learn from what we teach them. They learn from how we live. And I was proud that she was growing into someone who knew her worth, just like I had learned mine. It was around this time that Adam started acting. Different, not distant, if anything, more attentive. He'd stare at me sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. This soft, thoughtful expression on his face. He asked more questions about the future, about where I saw myself in 5 years, about whether I'd ever consider moving to a bigger house, about what kind of wedding I would have had if life had gone differently. I laughed off most of them, chalking it up to curiosity. But deep down, I think part of me knew something was coming. One chilly evening in late autumn, we planned a simple dinner at home. My daughter helped set the table and Adam offered to cook. I thought nothing of it until I walked into the dining room and saw the candles. My candles. Dozens of them, glowing softly, filling the room with the warm, comforting scent of vanilla and cedarwood. The table was set beautifully, with flowers and a little handwritten card that said, "Just us." Dinner was lovely, simple, cozy, perfect. We laughed, reminisced, talked about the future, and then, as the night was winding down, Adam stood up, walked around the table and got down on one knee. I froze. For a second, the whole world went silent. All I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat. And then he spoke. Not a rehearsed speech, not a list of reasons why he loved me, but something raw and real. "You were never someone I set out to save," he said, "because you never needed saving. You built this life with your own 2 hands. You raised an incredible daughter. You turned pain into purpose, and all I've ever wanted is to walk beside you. Not in front of you, not behind you, but right next to you. So if you'll let me, I want to be your partner in every chapter that's left." There were tears. So many tears. I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The heartbreak, the loneliness, the rebuilding. I thought about the girl who once believed she was unlovable, and the woman who had learned to love herself first. And standing there with my daughter watching from the hallway, and Adam holding a ring in his shaking hands, I said the easiest word I've ever spoken. Yes. The weeks that followed were a blur of planning and emotions. We decided on a small ceremony. Nothing extravagant, just close friends and family in a garden surrounded by flowers. My daughter was ecstatic, already practicing how she'd walk down the aisle as the junior maid of honor. And though part of me had once sworn I'd never walk down an aisle again, this time felt different. This time it wasn't about proving anything. It was about choosing love, choosing partnership, choosing joy. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house in the quiet, stopping at little reminders of the journey. The first candle I'd ever poured, the business plan scribbled in a notebook, the photo of me and my daughter from her first birthday. And I smiled, because this wasn't a fairy tale. This wasn't a story about a damsel in distress being rescued. This was a story about a woman who rescued herself, and then, when she was ready, allowed herself to be loved again. The wedding was everything I never knew I wanted. Intimate, emotional, honest. As I walked down the aisle, I locked eyes with Adam. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the fragile kind that shatters at the first sign of trouble, but the deep, grounding kind that comes from knowing you are exactly where you're meant to be. And as we exchanged vows, I realized that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a whole new one. One where love didn't erase the past, but honored it. Where partnership didn't define me, but amplified me. Where happiness wasn't a distant dream, but a daily reality. I used to think weddings were the finish line. The final scene in a long, complicated story. Movies make it seem that way, don't they? The credits roll as the couple walks hand in hand into the sunset, as if the hard part is over. But real life isn't like that. The wedding wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that came with its own joys, its own struggles, and its own lessons. Married life with Adam wasn't perfect, but I didn't want it to be. I didn't want flawless. I wanted real, and real is exactly what I got. Our mornings were messy, with burnt toast and mismatched socks and school drop-offs that always seemed rushed. Our evenings were chaotic, filled with homework battles, late-night work emails, and dishes that never seemed to end. But woven into the mess were moments of quiet magic, slow dances in the kitchen, whispered jokes in bed, and the simple, grounding comfort of waking up next to someone who chose me every single day. There were adjustments, of course. My daughter, used to it being just the two of us, had to get used to a new rhythm. Sometimes she pushed back, testing boundaries, retreating into her room when things felt unfamiliar. But Adam handled it with patience and care. He never tried to replace her father. He never demanded her affection. He just showed up, every day, in small ways, until she realized he wasn't going anywhere. One night, months after the wedding, she slipped her hand into his as they walked to the car. It was a small gesture, but I knew what it meant. She was letting him in. Blending families isn't something you just do. It's something you build, slowly, piece by piece. And that's what we were doing. Building something strong and steady and real. We learned how to communicate better. We learned how to disagree without tearing each other apart. We learned that love isn't just about romance. It's about teamwork. It's about figuring out who's going to pick up the groceries, who's taking the kid to soccer practice, who's handling the late-night school project emergency. It's about showing up, over and over and over again. One of the biggest lessons I learned in those first months of marriage was that vulnerability doesn't end when you say, I do. If anything, it deepens. There were days when I still felt like that scared single mom, the one who thought no one would ever love her again. And there were days when Adam confessed that he worried he'd never fully be enough for me and my daughter. But instead of hiding those fears, we shared them. We sat on the couch with mugs of tea and talked about our insecurities, our doubts, our hopes. And every time we had those conversations, our bond grew stronger. Professionally, my world was expanding too. The candle business had become more than just a brand. It was now a full-fledged company with a small team, partnerships, and a loyal customer base. I was invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship, single motherhood, and resilience. Women would come up to me after my talks with tears in their eyes, telling me that my story gave them hope. Every single time I was humbled, because the truth was I wasn't anyone special. I was just a woman who refused to stay broken. But success brought new challenges. Balancing work, marriage, and motherhood wasn't easy. There were days I felt like I was failing at all three. Days when I snapped at Adam for no reason, when I missed a school event, when orders piled up and emails went unanswered. The old me would have spiraled, drowning in guilt and self-blame. But the new me, she knew how to give herself grace. She knew that perfection was a myth, and that doing her best was more than enough. One evening, after a particularly exhausting week, I found myself standing in the kitchen, tears threatening to spill. Adam walked in, took one look at me, and wrapped me in a hug. "You don't have to do it all," he whispered. "You're allowed to rest." And so I did. We ordered takeout, watched a movie, and let the world wait. And the next morning I woke up with a reminder in my heart. Love isn't about keeping up appearances. It's about creating a safe space to fall apart, and then helping each other put the pieces back together. As the years went by, our little family grew stronger. My daughter blossomed, confident, witty, kind. She started calling Adam Dad one day without warning, and I'll never forget the way his eyes filled with tears. My business continued to flourish, but I made sure it never came at the expense of the life I was building at home. And Adam and I, well, we kept choosing each other over and over, through every season. But perhaps the most powerful part of this new chapter wasn't the success or the marriage or even the happiness. It was the peace of knowing that I had built a life that was truly mine, the peace of understanding that love didn't complete me, it complemented me, the peace of knowing that the girl who once cried herself to sleep now woke up every morning surrounded by laughter and warmth. And every once in a while, I'd find myself lying awake at night, thinking about the woman I used to be. I'd think about that night on the bedroom floor, about the tears and the heartbreak and the loneliness. And I'd wish I could reach back through time and whisper in her ear, "You have no idea how beautiful your life is going to be. You have no idea how much love is waiting for you. Just hold on. Because here's the thing. Happily ever after isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every single day. It's waking up and choosing to show up even when it's hard. It's choosing to love, even when fear tries to pull you back. It's choosing to believe that you are worthy, not because someone else says so, but because you are. And as I look around at the life I've built, the love I've found, the family I've grown, the woman I've become, I realize that my story isn't about what I lost. It's about everything I gained. It's funny how time moves, how it crawls when you're waiting for a wound to heal, and how it sprints once you finally learn to live again. Sometimes I catch myself staring at old photos of the woman I used to be, the scared, broken version of me, who thought her story ended the day her husband walked out. And then I glance at the mirror, at the woman standing there now, confident, loved, thriving, and I realize they're both me. The difference is one was surviving, and the other is living. Years have passed now since that dark chapter. My daughter isn't a little girl anymore. She's a teenager, full of opinions, sarcasm, and dreams bigger than the sky. I watch her move through the world with a boldness I never had at her age. She isn't afraid to speak her mind, to set boundaries, to take up space. And every time she calls me Mom, I'm reminded of how far we've both come. She and Adam have a bond that makes my heart swell. He never forced it. He simply earned it day by day. Now he's the one she calls when her car won't start. He's the one she asks for advice when school drama feels overwhelming. And though her biological father plays a small role in her life now, she often refers to Adam as my real dad. It's not about blood. It's about showing up. And he's shown up for her in every way that matters. My business, too, has transformed beyond anything I imagined. What began as a side hustle born from necessity is now a national brand with a team of passionate people who believe in the mission as much as I do. We've expanded beyond candles into skincare, wellness products, even home decor. But at the heart of it all, the message remains the same. Healing is beautiful. Every product carries a piece of my story. Every label is a reminder that from pain can come purpose. But perhaps the most unexpected part of this journey has been the speaking tours. I never set out to be a motivational speaker. The idea of standing on a stage terrified me. But the more I shared my story online, the more invitations came pouring in. And one day I said yes. My first event was in a small community center, maybe 50 people in the audience. I was nervous, hands trembling as I stepped up to the microphone. But as I spoke about heartbreak, motherhood, resilience, and rebuilding, something magical happened. People cried. People laughed. People stood up and shared their own stories. It was like watching a room full of broken hearts begin to stitch themselves back together. Now, I travel several times a year, speaking to hundreds, sometimes thousands, of women and men who are where I once was. I see their tears, their nods, their whispered me toos. And every time I step off that stage, I feel humbled, because my pain, the very thing that once made me feel small, has become a light that helps others find their way out of the dark. One evening, after a speaking event, a woman about my age approached me. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "I was going to give up," she said. "I thought I had nothing left to live for. But your story, it reminded me that maybe this isn't the end for me." I hugged her tightly and whispered, "It's not. This is just the beginning." And as she walked away, I realized that my story isn't just mine anymore. It belongs to every person who's ever felt broken and believed they couldn't rebuild. At home, life continued to evolve in beautiful, ordinary ways. Adam and I had learned the rhythm of marriage, the push and pull, the compromise, the laughter. We still had disagreements, still faced challenges, but we always found our way back to each other. Love, I've learned, isn't about never fighting. It's about fighting for each other, over and over again. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the stars, Adam asked, "Do you ever miss who you were before all this?" I thought about it for a long time. "Sometimes," I admitted. "I miss the girl who believed life would be simple. I miss the woman who trusted too easily. But then I remember everything I've gained because of what I lost. And I wouldn't trade it for anything." He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "I wouldn't trade it either." As I approach my mid-40s, I think a lot about legacy. Not the kind measured in money or accolades, but the kind measured in impact. I think about what my daughter will remember about me. I hope she remembers a mom who was strong but soft, who fought fiercely for happiness, but never forgot to laugh. I hope she remembers that I wasn't perfect, far from it, but that I showed up, even on the days I felt like I couldn't. And I hope she remembers that love isn't about fairy tales. It's about showing up, staying and choosing, every single day. Sometimes late at night I write letters to my future self, little time capsules of who I am right now. In one of them I wrote, "If you're reading this, I hope you're still chasing dreams. I hope you're still saying yes to new adventures. And I hope you're still choosing joy, even when life tries to make you forget it's an option." Those letters remind me that my story isn't over, that even now, with everything I've built, there's still more waiting for me. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. We don't heal so we can stop growing. We heal so we can grow. We don't rebuild our lives so they can stay the same. We rebuild so they can expand, evolve, and surprise us. And every day I'm surprised By the love in my home, by the strength in my daughter, by the purpose in my work, by the woman I've become. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. The best parts of our stories are often written after we think the book is over. And mine, it's just getting good. Time, I've learned, doesn't just pass. It transforms you. It softens your edges, deepens your understanding, and humbles you with its quiet wisdom. And somewhere in the swirl of busy days, business milestones, school drop-offs, late-night talks, and countless cups of coffee, life quietly moved forward. My daughter, once a chubby-cheeked toddler who clung to my leg, is now packing boxes for college. Just writing that sentence still feels surreal. The day we visited her chosen campus, I felt a wave of emotions I wasn't prepared for. Pride, of course. Pride so big it nearly knocked the breath out of me. But also fear. Fear of letting go. Fear of the silence that would settle into our home once she was gone. Fear of not being needed in the same way anymore. We walked through tree-lined paths and brick buildings while she chatted excitedly about classes and roommates. And I smiled and nodded. But inside, I was replaying every moment. Her first steps, her first word, the first time she called Adam Dad. All those nights I thought I was failing, as a mother suddenly felt worth it, because here she was, strong, confident, and ready to take on the world. The night before she left for orientation, she crawled into bed beside me, just like she used to when she was little. "Are you going to be okay without me?" she asked. I laughed through my tears. "I should be asking you that." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "You taught me how to be brave, Mom. I think we're both going to be okay." And with that, I knew she was right, because letting go isn't about losing. It's about trusting that what you've built is strong, enough to stand on its own. The house felt different after she left. Quieter, emptier. I'd catch myself setting an extra plate at the table or waiting for the sound of her footsteps in the hallway. There were moments I felt lost, not in a dramatic falling apart way, but in a quiet, aching way. For so long, being her mom was the center of my world. Now, I had to rediscover who I was outside of that role. Adam, as always, was my steady anchor. "This is your time," he told me one night as we sat on the porch with glasses of wine. "You've spent years taking care of everyone else. Maybe now it's time to take care of you." He was right, and for the first time in decades, I started thinking about what I wanted. Not just for my family, but for myself. I enrolled in a creative writing course at a local university. I'd always loved to write. Journaling had gotten me through some of the hardest moments of my life. But I'd never had the courage to pursue it seriously. Sitting in that classroom surrounded by people half my age was intimidating at first, but it also felt thrilling. It was a reminder that it's never too late to learn, to grow, to dream. At the same time, I started working on a memoir, not just about my journey as a single mom, but about the lessons I had learned along the way. Resilience, forgiveness, the power of second chances. Writing it was emotional. There were days I cried over the keyboard, days I laughed out loud remembering moments I'd long forgotten. But it was also healing. It was my way of honoring the woman I'd been, celebrating the woman I'd become, and leaving a piece of myself for my daughter, and maybe for the world. Meanwhile, the business continued to thrive and we expanded into new areas. Mentorship programs for women entrepreneurs, collaborations with mental health organizations, even scholarships for single mothers going back to school. Every initiative felt like a full-circle moment, like planting seeds in soil I once thought was barren. And every time I spoke at an event or read a letter from a woman whose life had changed because of our work, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. But amidst all the growth and success, I never forgot the foundation of it all. The love that built this new life with me. Adam and I were closer than ever. Not because everything was perfect, but because we had learned how to weather storms together. We still argued sometimes, about finances, about schedules, about silly things like how to load the dishwasher. But our love was stronger than any disagreement. It wasn't the fiery, all-consuming love of youth. It was deeper, steadier, rooted in respect and understanding. One weekend, we decided to take a road trip. Just the two of us. No business calls, no speaking events, no responsibilities. Just us and the open road. We drove along the coast, stopping at small towns and hidden cafes, laughing until our cheeks hurt. Somewhere along that trip, I realized something beautiful. Even after all these years, we were still falling in love, not with who we were when we met, but with who we were becoming, constantly evolving, constantly choosing each other. One evening on that trip, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and gold, Adam turned to me and said, "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" I looked out at the water and nodded. "All the time." He took my hand and smiled. If you had told that broken, heartbroken woman years ago that this would be her life, would she have believed it? I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. Not in a million years. He kissed my hand gently. I'm glad she didn't give up. That night, as we sat beneath a canopy of stars, I thought about all the versions of myself that had existed over the years. The naive newlywed, the broken-hearted single mom, the determined entrepreneur, the hopeful wife, the proud mother. Each version had felt like the final one, like the story ended there. But life kept proving me wrong. There was always more to write, more to feel, more to discover. And maybe that's the real magic of life. That it's never finished. We're never finished. We're constantly growing, shedding, rebuilding, and becoming. And the moment we think we've reached the end, life gently reminds us that we're only just turning the page. There's a strange stillness that comes when the storms have passed. It's not silence, not really, but a gentle hum of life settling into itself. That's where I find myself now, decades after the day he walked away, years after I thought my story had ended. Here I am, living a life that is fuller, softer, and more beautiful than anything I ever dared to imagine. And if there's one truth that anchors me now, it's this. I was never broken beyond repair. I was only unfinished. The memoir I started writing in that creative writing class became more than just a side project. It became a mission. I poured everything into those pages. The heartbreak, the healing, the nights spent crying in silence, the mornings spent holding my daughter with shaky hands, the countless small steps that rebuilt my confidence. I wrote about the fear of being unwanted and the slow, stubborn discovery that I had always been enough. I wrote about love, the kind that leaves and the kind that stays, and how the latter is always quieter, but infinitely more powerful. And when I typed the final sentence, I cried harder than I had in years. It wasn't just a book. It was my life, captured in words. My scars, my triumphs, my soul, all laid bare. When it was published, I expected it to resonate with a few people. I didn't expect it to become a bestseller. Letters poured in from women and men who saw themselves in my story. Some were still in the middle of their heartbreak. Others were rebuilding just like I once had. A few had already found their peace and simply wanted to say thank you. One message from a single father of two said, "Your story gave me the courage to believe I'm not too broken to try again." And that's when I knew. My pain had been transformed into something far bigger than me. It had become a light for others still searching for their way out of the dark. Meanwhile, life at home continued to unfold in all its messy, beautiful imperfection. My daughter thrived in college, calling me often. Sometimes for advice, sometimes just to tell me a silly story about her day. She was studying psychology, determined to help people heal, the way I had learned to heal myself. "I want to understand how people break," she told me once, "so I can help them put themselves back together." And in that moment, I saw the legacy I was leaving. Not in money, not in business, but in the heart of a young woman who had learned resilience from watching me live it. Adam and I settled into a new rhythm, too. With the nest a little emptier and the house a little quieter, we found ourselves rediscovering each other. We traveled, sometimes to places we'd always dreamed of, sometimes to small towns just a few hours away. We spent lazy Sundays in bed, reading or talking, or simply existing in the kind of comfortable silence that only comes with years of loving someone deeply. And every now and then we'd glance at each other across the dinner table, a shared smile passing between us, a silent acknowledgement of everything we'd built together. There were challenges too, of course. Life doesn't stop throwing them at you just because you've survived a few. There were health scares, business hurdles, and days when anxiety crept back in like an old unwelcome friend. But I faced them differently now. I no longer saw setbacks as proof that I wasn't strong enough. I saw them as reminders of how far I'd come. Proof that I was strong enough, because I'd already weathered worse. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I stumbled across an old photo. A picture of me, heavily pregnant and sitting alone on the edge of a bed. My face was swollen from crying, my eyes empty. For a long time I just stared at it. That woman had been so sure her life was over. She had believed she was unlovable, that happiness was a closed door. And yet, here I was, surrounded by love, by laughter, by purpose. It was almost hard to believe we were the same person. And in that moment, I didn't feel pity for her. I felt gratitude, because without her pain, I wouldn't have this strength. Without her heartbreak, I wouldn't know this kind of love. That night, I wrote one final letter. Not to my future self, but to my past self. You were never too much. You were never too broken. You were never unworthy. The pain you're feeling now isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of the most beautiful chapter. One day, you'll wake up next to someone who loves you exactly as you are. One day, you'll watch your daughter chase her dreams and know you helped her believe in herself. One day, you'll look in the mirror and see not a woman who was left, but a woman who rose. And when that day comes, you'll understand that everything you went through was leading you right here. I tucked that letter into the pages of my memoir, a reminder that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about honoring it and choosing to grow beyond it. Now, as I sit on my porch, watching the sun set over a life I built from the ashes, I feel nothing but peace. The girl I was, the woman I am, and the woman I'm still becoming, they all coexist within me. And for the first time in my life, I don't wish for more. I'm content. Deeply, truly content. I'm no longer waiting for the next chapter. I'm living it. Every messy, beautiful, complicated, joyful page of it. And if there's one thing I hope my story teaches anyone who hears it, it's this. You are never too broken to start over. You are never too far gone to find love. And you are never, ever too late to become the person you were always meant to be. Because the truth is, I was never just a single mom. I was never just a woman who got left. I was never just a survivor. I was, and always will be, the author of my own story. And this is just the beginning.